Good morning, and welcome to today's program, Genealogy Research with Billion Graves. My name is Matthew Banke. I'm a reference librarian at the Kokomo-Howard Public Library. Today, I'm going to talk about billion graves. I'm going to start by giving a side-by-side comparison with Find a Grave, one of the other most popular grave cataloging websites in the world. And the last 2 months, I gave presentations on how to do research and how to become a content creator with Find a Grave. So I thought it made sense to do a little side-by-side comparison. Next, I'm going to give an overview of the Billion Graves website and the main features. Then I'm going to give a short demonstration on how to do some research, how to search some cemeteries. And then I'm going to talk about how to become a content creator. So to start off with, here is a little PowerPoint presentation that I created to give a side-by-side analysis of Find a Grave and Billion Graves. So these two are they hold the kind of the lion's share on grave cataloging, but they're quite different in how they approach it. So Find a Grave has been around for a long time. They were created in 1995, and they were created by Jim Tipton of Salt Lake City. And his sole purpose in creating Find a Grave was to create a memorial space for his hobby of famous graves. He liked to visit famous graves. He'd like to take photos, and this was a place to memorialize them. So over time, this became more used for genealogy. It still has the famous graves feature, but genealogy has really taken it over, and kind of the emphasis is a little bit more personalized memorials, and it's expressed in a number of ways to personalize the memorials. It was purchased in Ancestry by Ancestry.com in 2014, and it links very reliably to Ancestry. Now, Billion Graves is very different. That it was created in 2011, and it's always been solely for genealogy. It's a little bit more dry in that way, and it's focused more on really capturing whole cemeteries. And the thing that distinguishes Billion Graves is that every photo is paired with a GPS coordinate, and you have to take photos with their app. So they're independently owned, and had the same ownership for the last 10 years. And they partner with Family Search and MyHeritage and link with them. Both websites are free. The only paid component with Find a Grave is if you wish to sponsor a memorial, it's $5, and it will take away the ads, and you can add additional images. With Billion Graves, you can get a lot of mileage out of their free subscription, although they also have a premium service called Billion Graves Plus. It takes away the ads, but there are also some premium features that I'll talk about later. Both sites derive revenue from their ads. Here's the big difference. GPS is optional with Find a Grave. They also have a mobile app, but you do not need to use their app to take grave photos. With Billion Graves, the GPS is required. There are ways that you can create memorials without pairing a GPS coordinate or without actually even taking a grave photo. But the main purpose of this site is to take a photo that links a GPS coordinate. And the mobile app is required. So that breaks down the way things are done are very different. So with Find a Grave, it's kind of a totally backwards process for Billion Graves. A person that wants to contribute content to Find a Grave actually creates the memorial first, and ideally they're going to do that by utilizing a source. So if they're doing somebody that recently passed away, a lot of times a Find a Grave contributor is going to get that information from they're going to get that from a website, they're going to get it from a website, from a news source, or from a cemetery database, and they're going to plug that information in, and then that person might never visit the grave site, and then somebody else will independently visit the grave site, take a photo, and they'll attach it to the memorial. So it's kind of there's kind of a division of labor. And as a result, I've found that there's a little bit more of an error rate because of this division of labor. There also, you don't have to have a photo of the grave on Find a Grave. You can actually just create a memorial. There are people that create memorials from cemetery books or from county or local history books. And so, memorials can even be created for, there are famous memorials for like Robin Hood and Little John, who are actually kind of folk legends. They're not even real people. So, you got to think about Find a Grave a little bit differently, but there's a lot of great information on there as well. So that was a little bit of a discursion. Billion graves, on the other hand, by and large, you have to take a photo using their mobile app on your phone, and it goes directly to the site. You upload it, then you transcribe it. And you can transcribe it yourself, or another volunteer can transcribe it. And they also have what's called second pass transcriptions. So the creation of the memorial is kind of a little bit more fluid. There's a little bit more peer review, and just having that GPS coordinate paired with the photo, it actually adheres to the genealogical proof standard, which is kind of a big deal. It's kind of a guiding principle in professional genealogy, and it just it makes your record more reliable. Kind of the downside of this manner of doing things is that Billion Graves actually does own all of its content. So if you're a contributor, you don't get to actually have any control over the photos that you take. They actually all belong to Billion Graves. And as a result, the only way to get changes done on the site or through the app are submitting help desk tickets. I've been spending a lot of time in the last 2 months becoming a content creator and learning all the different avenues of using Billion Graves, and I've submitted like a dozen help desk tickets. My experience has been that they're very responsive and very accurate in resolving issues, but that's kind of a different feature than Find a Grave. By and large, Find a Grave is quite a bit easier to use, although if you have an editorial suggestion, you have to send a edit to the individual memorial creator. And so this is a little bit of a different process. It makes it a little bit more personal, which is not always good. Find a Grave can feel like a bit more of a community, but then there's also challenges with interacting with memorial creators. Find a Grave does mediate also, and they also they manage all the famous memorials. So yeah, and lastly, there's really no explicit terms of use with Find a Grave. They kind of have some frequently asked questions. They do have forums that help people resolve issues. But the way that things are done are kind of loose with Find a Grave. Billion Graves, on the other hand, has very explicit terms of use, and a lot of these terms of use are really there to protect Billion Graves and its legality. That people aren't using their photos for their own benefit, that if you're contributing, Billion Graves owns everything. The one last thing that I want to say is that between the two platforms, I actually, as a photography enthusiast, I really enjoyed contributing to Find and Grave a little bit more because, I could use my DSLR camera, or I can use my smartphone, and I have a little bit more freedom when taking grave photos. I've worked a lot with both mediums, Billy Graves and Find a Grave, and I like that I can actually take kind of close-up photos. I don't have to just use the app. The app doesn't really give you options. It's just a quick shot. You can't edit, so I really enjoy editing my photos and just making them look as good as possible. And this kind of gives me a little bit more personal satisfaction and emotion when I'm working with Find a Grave and I'm uploading photos. Billion Graves, like I said, it's cut and dry. The upside of this, though, is that you will get a lot more. It makes you focus when you just have this app up on Billion Graves. You're encouraged by Billion Graves to just keep continuously snapping the photos, then go home, connect to your Wi-Fi connection, and upload. So, like I said, different emphases and just kind of a different process. But I want to try to explain Billion Graves a little bit more since it's a newer platform and not as many people have used it, especially here in the Midwest. Billion Graves gets used a bit more out west and internationally. So for the rest of this talk, I'm going to explain what it's like to use Billion Graves, and I'm going to start by going to their website. So I'm going to stop this share, and then I'm going to go now to the billiongraves.com site and share the screen here. So this is the landing page for Billion Graves, and pretty straightforward stuff. Right here on the left is my profile. Like I mentioned, I've spent a lot of time contributing to Billion Graves, and I really like taking photos, and I also really like to do transcriptions. So it kind of keeps a record of what I've done so far. Down below is a tutorial video, and this is just a getting started tutorial, but they have a great deal of tutorials that help you with kind of troubleshooting anything you're trying to do on the site. And I've found these to be very helpful. Like I mentioned before, it's a little bit more of a learning curve using Billion Graves than it is with Find and Grave. Here are a few more features. They have a Billion Graves tree that actually links with Family Search's global tree. Here you can, it gives instructions in several places on how to do transcriptions, how to upload photos and take photos. You can't actually upload photos on their website. You have to use their app. This keeps a record of all of the photos that I've taken, my photo requests. These tutorials and guides, again, I find them to be quite useful. This gives you kind of a quick shot of some of the other features. This add cemetery is really a useful feature. If you live in an area that hasn't been covered by Billion Graves as much, and here I am in central Indiana, where I'm finding there are a lot of cemeteries that haven't even been pinned yet, let alone photographed. This gives you an overview of how to do that. I'm going to talk more about that in detail later. So back to the main page. Down here are my cemeteries. Oops. Here are my cemeteries. So these are the cemeteries that I've contributed to in the last couple of months. And I've spent a lot of time taking photos and transcribing photos. And so here are, and then there's a kind of a little bit of another view. These are the photos that I've actually added. So it's a little bit confusing since their numbers don't sync up exactly. Here's some kind of a little bit of redundancy of pictures, transcriptions, events. Events are actually, you can actually organize events with billion graves. There are Eagle Scout projects. There are people from the Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that coordinate events. But then there are just all kinds of genealogists that collaborate, and Billion Graves makes it really easy to collaborate with other people. Really, all you need is a smartphone and download the app, and you can kind of crisscross a whole cemetery with one or more people. You can parcel off sections of a larger cemetery and get more work done collaborating than just by yourself. So here's the volunteer tab, and again, it gives more information about how to take photos and transcribe. This is the research area. You can do a person search, a surname search. You can search by a cemetery. And then here's the upgrade tab, which this is Billion Graves Plus. And I want to give a brief overview of Billion Graves Plus and why it might be worth your little bit of extra money to use. I actually got a free 1 month subscription to Billion Graves Plus. I didn't go for the pay feature because I found that I get enough out of the free subscription to not necessitate that I pay. But I'm going to go briefly over some of the features in Billion Graves Plus that might make it worthwhile for you to pay. So the two of the biggest features are family plots and nearby graves. I find that these two features make Billion Graves the most realistic cemetery cataloging database there is, because this simulates what it's like to actually walk a cemetery. If you pull up a record, and in a minute I'm going to give a demonstration of what this actually looks like, but if you pull up an individual person's record on Billion Graves under the cemetery where they're at, under the normal feature you'll get nearby graves, but you only get like 5 or 6 graves that are nearby. With Billion Graves and family plots and nearby graves, with family plots, you'll actually get everybody with the same surname that's buried in the cemetery. Now, this is a really useful feature, especially if you're going to a cemetery that you've never been to, and it's a great way for incidental learning to take place. What I mean by that is, if you get a chance to walk a cemetery for the first time and you stumble upon not just your ancestor that you're looking for, but you find out other family members, other ancestors that you weren't even looking for, and that you might not even know about, it's such a cool experience. And it's very valuable for your research because it opens up new possibilities. Sometimes it even breaks down brick walls. And so with this family plot, you can see everybody with your surname that's in the entire cemetery. And not only that, you get a GPS pin, so you get to know how close they are. And sometimes by knowing how close somebody is, you get a good understanding of their relationship to the ancestor that you were originally looking for. The nearby graves is a similar feature, but again, it's expanded from the basic feature with the unpaid subscription. So you get to see quite a few nearby graves. And the reason this is really helpful beyond the family plots is that, there will be family members that can be buried nearby. I've had this experience. They don't have the same surname, but it's their daughter who married, and she and her husband are buried near her parents. So it's a great way to be able to make additional discoveries. Global Family is a feature that allows you to kind of search for your surname all over the world. There's some ways that you can do this with the basic function, but not as extensively. And I found that this is a pretty nice feature. Again, not so great that I'm willing to pay. I'm a little bit I'm a little bit on the cheap end, and I already pay for enough genealogy programs that I can get enough bang out of my free subscription. But there's also this notification feature, which is really good. I do this with Google Alerts. I do this on Ancestry and Family Search. This is a paid feature though, so they don't let you do this for free. So again, if you don't want to be coming back to Billion Graves and just searching your surname over and over again, this is a nice feature. There's also the priority support, and I've got to say, I didn't really have any difference. I found the same response rate, and I thought the response rate was quite good on the free feature. I didn't find them to be any quicker, and my issues got resolved at the same rate. So that's just my 2 cents on that. Also with the premium feature, you get discount rates. With MyHeritage, there's a new program called Ancestor Cloud and GPS Origins DNA, which I don't really know much about, but these are further incentives to buying Billion Graves Plus. So I just wanted to give that little overview of Billion Graves Plus. I am not being paid by Billion Graves to promote them. I'm just doing this because there are some additional features, and there are definitely some good features. So here is the help desk area, and they have a lot of frequently asked questions. I kind of struggled with this area when I first started. It was a little bit of a learning curve just to write the help desk tickets, but once I got used to it, and it just became, it kind of became second nature to kind of troubleshoot, and figure out, how to resolve issues that came about. One other area that I want to go into before I talk about how I do research is this blog feature. And, I'm really impressed by the quality of the written content on Billion Graves blog. And if you like history, and if you like history and culture and cemeteries like I do, there's a lot of cool articles. This one's about 10 Victorian cemetery traditions. I read this recently, and I love Victorian era cemetery iconography and all the beautiful ornate headstones and the symbolism. And so there are some really good ones. There are really good articles about like this one, Native American burial rituals. And I know there are, like superstitions. And some of these blogs will actually help you with creating content. Like, what about unmarked graves? This walks you through how to document an unmarked grave. So there's a lot of educational and just fun articles in the blog feature. And so anyway, I recommend that, and I'm honestly pretty impressed with how they do that. Okay, so now I'm going to search a cemetery, and I'm going to show you how I've been learning how to do research. So I'm going to show you an example of one of the cemeteries that I worked on. This is Salem Cemetery. It's here in Howard County. It's a pretty early cemetery as far as when Howard County was settled. It's in a rural area, and so it's kind of outside of Kokomo proper. And the way that I've learned how to search cemeteries in Billion Graves is a bit different than Find a Grave. I can kind of scroll down to the rest of the landing page, and I get to see what other cemeteries are nearby. But if I want to search within the cemetery, I actually just hit search, which is a little counterintuitive. And now I get a listing of everybody that's buried in Salem Cemetery, or everybody that I've personally recorded. And I'm going to go to a popular surname in Salem Cemetery, Goyer family here. And I'm going to go to the patriarch of the family, John Goyer, who Was born all the way back in 1822, and he was a well-known farmer in Howard County. I'm just going to go ahead and click on him. So as you can see, here's his photo, grave photo, and he's in a family burial plot. As I scroll down, I get to see the nearby graves. So here's Julia Goyer, and I believe she's buried right next to him. That's his wife. And so here are the other graves that have been recorded. Remember, I was talking about the family plot and nearby graves that are part of the Billion Graves Plus feature. So this only gives me 7 other graves. So like I said, if you upgrade to Billion Graves Plus, you get more detail. But you do get a short overview of who's buried nearby. Then you have all of these suggestions on death records and birth records, marriage records, census records. So if you click in this area, you get the chance to link to MyHeritage and Family Search. I didn't mention this before, but the way that Famous Memorials is handled in Billion Graves is very different. So right here, it's very different from Find a Grave. Find a Grave, you actually have to submit it to Find a Grave. You have to write a biography and follow a certain format. They are pretty explicit in their rules on famous graves. But here, you add a Wikipedia URL, which is a little, I don't know. I'm not crazy about this practice, but hey, they just have chosen to handle famous memorials very differently. And as you can see here, this is the GPS pin of Salem Cemetery. But there's also a unique personal GPS for the memorial that I'm searching right here. Here on the right, I have a timeline of Mr. Goyer's life, which, you know, they do this with a lot of different genealogy programs. Ancestry.com, for example, does this. I know Family Search does as well. And yeah, here's some more. There's another quick reference to all of the different documentation that is covered in John Goyer. I'm going to do one other search, and I'm going to search one of my ancestors. I'm going to search one that I know that I'll find because I haven't. A lot of my ancestors are actually not chronicled here for because I'm in an area that hasn't been covered as much by Family Search. So here's actually one of my ancestors that died in the last 15 years. And one of the reasons that I want to show this record is that it's a little different. This one actually doesn't have a grave photo. So most of the records in Billion Graves actually do have grave photos, but this one does not. And I think somebody did this project. This was kind of a veterans project. And so this ancestor was in the Air Force, and he's buried in South Whitley Cemetery, which I've done some other demonstrations on this website. And it's really well chronicled in Find a Grave, but there are not very many headstone photos. There's only 20 headstone records in all of Whitley County Cemetery. I know that there's like about 8,000 total records in Find a Grave. This is not to disparage Billion Graves. This is simply to say people need to work on Billion Graves and add content, especially here in Indiana, in the Midwest. Indiana is the crossroads of America, and there are so many people out west that would be benefited from cemetery gravestone photos. So I just wanted to highlight this kind of to emphasize that the work needs to be done. See, look, there are 125 actual records, but only 15 of the gravestone photos have actually been transcribed. And so that leads me to where I want to go next, where this is a great area that people can volunteer in. Like I said, so many headstones need to be transcribed. And if you get into this, like I said, you can earn a free 1-month trial for Billion Graves Plus. 500 grave transcriptions really sounds like a lot, but it's really not. Especially, I don't know, it's almost kind of a mindless activity. You do need to really pay attention to the headstones. But a lot of them are really simple. You're just reading exactly what you see. And let me just give an example of this. Oh, got a little glitch here. It doesn't want to show, doesn't want to take me to South Whitley. So instead, I'm going to go to one of the cemeteries I've worked on a lot. I'll go back to the home page, and I'm going to take you down to the cemetery that I was talking about, Alto Baptist Church. Oh, this is another cemetery that I've just last week, a week from Sunday, I took 138 grave photos. This old cemetery in Howard County. It's actually close to a very small community called Alto, and it was the graveyard for Alto Baptist Church. Now, I took a lot of photos, and not all of them are going to be easy to read because this is an old cemetery. This one, I can only make out the last name, and it's Heaton. I do a little bit of extra work with these grave records, and I will actually consult other sources. But with this one, just so I can move on to the next headstone, I can't make out the first name. So at the very least, I'm going to provide the family name for this record. So there is this photo, there's a family name, and if you're able to use the nearby graves or family plots, you'll have a better chance of being able to identify who this record is. But for right now, I'm just going to simply say Heaton. I can see that I can definitely identify the surname. However, I've taken photos that later I couldn't transcribe, and I will go up here and I will flag it. And so I can, when you do this, when you go to flag a headstone, you are telling Billion Graves that the photo is blurred, the headstone is unreadable. It's not a headstone. You know, you get, just with so many other genealogy programs that are volunteer based, you're not always going to get top quality images, and you have to filter through those. So that's just kind of the nature of the beast. And you have, as a volunteer, the ability to influence that quality control. So right now, I'm just going to write Heaton for this one. I'm going to show you another example of a memorial. So I go ahead and hit next. And here I have one that's much easier to identify. So this is Nancy C Hobson. And just really straightforward, this is the daughter of S.A. Hobson. So this is Nancy C Hobson. I'm going to move my image right there down below. Very, very simple, straightforward transcriptions. She died in 1852. Now, some of this information I can't make out. It's June 19th, 1852. So I'm only going to provide information that my naked eye can see, although there are times where I work a little bit harder and I will look up some source material and try to do a little bit deeper identification. Pardon me, I've got to actually hit the scroll down and pick from the directory. You can't just type in, you actually have to connect with what's in the directory. But here's a transcription, okay? So I got Nancy C Hobson. There's also an advanced mode, and this advanced mode is really, really good. So here I can't quite read this. It's aged, it looks like 20 years, 2 months, 2 days. And so I could enter her death date as well, but I'm a little bit unsure here. It looks like the stone is kind of warped at this point. But I can read Nancy C. Hobson. And then I'm just going to hit save. And I'm going to move on. So that's an example of a transcription. And here it actually links to family search. Now this one does not provide me with a death date. And so it's kind of funny. Sometimes the family search connections to their records are really off. Like they're not even the same geographical area. They're not, the death dates and birth dates are totally wrong. And so I really err on the side of caution with this as well. I think it said that she was 20 years old. So she would not have been born in 1847. There's no death date on here. So this is probably another Nancy C. Hobson. So I'm going to go ahead and reject it. And then I X off. And then I just go to next. And so, I mean, it becomes kind of fun and addictive, just going through and identifying the transcriptions. And I mean, you're really helping to the overall body, the genealogy body of work. So I'm going to go back to my main menu here. Back to the home page. And so that is about it. I wanted to give an overview of how to use Find a Grave, how to use Billion Graves along with Find a Grave, how to know what the difference between the two platforms is, and how to actually do a little bit of research and how to do some transcriptions and volunteer and take photos. The photo taking process is actually quite a bit different, and I can't give a demonstration of that right now without actually going through my smartphone. And but really, it's a very simple process. You simply just download the Billion Graves app, and then the best way I've found of actually pinning a cemetery location is actually to go there. There are different websites that have GPS coordinates for cemeteries, but like I said, I just really prefer to go there. The GPS coordinates on different sites, they're not always accurate. Find a Grave's not always accurate. It might be somewhere across the street or not right on the cemetery spot. So you can actually do that with your smartphone. And then, like I said, taking the photos is very simple. One of the issues that I've had is actually syncing the photos between the app and the website. But again, that's just a little bit of troubleshooting. But yeah, like I said, using Billion Graves along with other platforms is really important because it's kind of a cross-referencing where, you know, Billion Graves kind of corrects the errors of Find a Grave and vice versa. So I hope this short demonstration has been helpful, and I hope this encourages you to get out and do some volunteer work and do a little bit of digging and take photos of grave cemeteries, because it is really work that needs to be done. And it's done before, but like all these different platforms kind of work together. And I hope that this has been helpful. And if you have any questions about genealogy in Howard County, Indiana, please visit the Kokomo-Howard Public Library here in downtown Kokomo, and go down into the basement and talk to the people at the genealogy department. And I hope you have a great and wonderful day. Thank you.